I'm Ethan Stanley, and joining me today is Caitlin Stabby. This is another JPI interview with Mr. Turner, Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Averill, Principal of Senior High School, and Mr. Apostol, Assistant Superintendent of Schools. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Just to start off, the budget passed. What were the numbers for the budget vote?
Well, I don't remember the exact final count, but I know that right now the budget passed by 88 votes total. So
okay, so very close.
It was, and I think there were somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,700 or 2,800 total voters. So okay. Yes, it's close.
Okay, and what do you think that means for the future? You know, the next 2 years of the vote. Do you think it's going to keep close in the vote?
Ethan, I really couldn't project as to what the community's feelings are going to be into the future, but I hope that we can build on the inertia from this and continue to get community support for the school system.
Okay.
How can we continue to improve the educational experience for the students?
I'm going to ask for these gentlemen.
Well, first of all, with the budget passing, we won't have to cut certain parts of the budget out, like staff development monies that were put in there for improvement of education. Student programming won't have to be cut. Certainly, that's very exciting for me as a secondary principal, because when that's on the chopping block, all students are affected, and students are affected immediately. In the past, the last couple of years, this time of year, students have been a little bit down, and they're going into testing time, and they're feeling like they have to, raise money, and they get distracted on trying to raise money for their sports program and other things, when truthfully they should be concentrating on their schoolwork. By the budget passing right now, they have a good opportunity to just do that and not have to worry about anything else. So I'm very excited as a principal right now.
What is the most important issue facing education today from an administrator's view?
Well, I think it is the lack of funds, particularly lack of state aid. State aid has been cut quite a bit in the last couple or 3 years, obviously because the state itself doesn't have any money. Businesses in the state have been moving out. Sales tax revenue has gone down, mainly because of what's happening on Wall Street. So consequently, the state has less money to share with school districts, and as a result, school districts have to fill that gap, and they fill that gap by increasing taxes, and property owners are taxed out, or tax fatigued, if you will.
Right.
And therefore, that a lot of budgets, as we experienced in the last couple of years, have been voted down, and what that does is, as Mr. Averill says, forces us to cut staff and cut program, and the students suffer from that.
If I could interject, what I would like to kind of perhaps move beyond the fiscal concerns, because that's although I agree with Mr. Apostol, I think that's really what has been at the forefront from the administrative realm. I think perhaps the biggest issues that are impacting school systems now outside of the money is the involvement of politicians in many aspects of the school system that 20 years ago and 30 years ago they hadn't been hot topics for political debates and for people to get political ground. So now we're dealing with what's referred to as race to the top, which is federal oversight, which has come down under the Obama administration. We still have not seen No Child Left Behind get reallocated, and of course that's actually the Elementary Secondary Education Act from the late 60s. So we're being asked to align ourselves with new Common Core curricular standards. These are, it's just a different way of doing business. We have to develop new evaluation systems for our teachers and for our principals, and really trying to implement all of these things in a very fast fashion. I feel as though we're working to be in compliance, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're working to be improving the school system. And but there's such severe threats of what happens if we're not in compliance. So that's very challenging, I think, any one of these from an administrative perspective. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And keep in mind that anything that comes down to us from the state originates in the state legislature. And they're not educators, they're politicians. And as a result, we have to react to whatever they feel their constituency wants.
Right.
And I think a big challenge is just the climate-facing educators today, the overall climate-facing educators. Statistically, there are statistics that can be twisted and pushed any way they want to make an educator look like they may not be doing the job that they really are doing. I just think that we've come a long way. I've been in education now for 25 years, and since I've stepped into education, I think teachers have learned a tremendous amount about how to handle all the diversity associated with different students' learning needs, and with that aren't really being recognized at this point for the work that they do. And I think that's a big problem because teachers need the autonomy to be able to get in their classroom and really shine. And a lot of times today, the climate is making them hold back so that they can direct all their teaching to a test or to a one-day event that's going to be a snapshot of that student, but it's going to mean everything to the district and that teacher. So I think we have to work along with that. We have to work along with the politicians. And truthfully, I think there's a lot of politicians that need to allow us to do our jobs and to do our jobs the best way we can.
I understand. Mr. Turner, before you said you've been having trouble on finding a way to evaluate teachers. Is that coming from the legislature in the state? Well,
I guess I'll try to explain it as concisely as I can. Of course, within school systems, we've had long-standing practices of doing evaluations, and I think reflecting on some of what Mr. Averill had said, we may have in the past been looking for lots of different things, classroom culture, what's going on with student discipline, etc. But those are not things which are quantifiable and which will be put onto the front page of a newspaper, or will now with the new, what's part of the new regulations is student performance on standardized tests is now going to become quantifiable on a teacher evaluation. And what's regretful is there are so many things that aren't being quantified, and it shifts what's important. And I think then the only other problem that we have is the time frames in which many of the guidance documents, an example, New York State Education Department gave us about 2 weeks ago the guidance documents on an evaluation system that we were expected to have in place last September. So we're being asked to comply with laws in time frames before we're given the information on what compliance means with the laws. And this is not something which is unique to Saugerties, but this is all across New York State at this point. So sometimes the cart is before the horse, and we're working diligently to try to remain in compliance, only to find out next week that what we were working on today needs to be shifted and adjusted, and so we're going back and recreating the wheel again so that we can maintain compliance. Okay.
Can you describe the dark days of 2011 through 2009 through 2011, where the district had to deal a financial mess left from the previous administration?
I think Mr. Averill probably best can answer that question. He lives it every day.
Well, I would say that obviously financially, I took over when I was transitioned into being the junior senior high school principal with no clubs, no activities, no sports, which really is very difficult. In my mind, I'm in for the holistic approach to education, and I think all of those are major parts of what a student needs, not only for students for their transcripts to go to college, but just for time management, for leadership skills, you name it, it's involved with extracurricular activities. And not only that, but the pieces of cutting staff in the middle of the school year, that was very traumatic for the staff and the students that first year that it hit. And in January, when we gave pink slips out to 40 members of our school, that was an awful day to be in a school district, to be an administrator, to be a student, and the parents and everybody else that's involved in education. But one of the things that it did which I think was a real positive in this school district, is it showed how everybody can come together. I just remember going out to the football field and doing about 350 push-ups with the Push-Up Palooza, and the excitement of all the students out there figuring that now we have an opportunity to take charge and really do something for ourselves. And I think that galvanized a lot of people. That helped out a lot. But we've had to think outside the box tremendously over the last couple of years. And what I mean by that is we had to do things that no other school has really done. For example, we call other schools, we hold referee clinics here so that we can run team scrimmages in the school. So instead of paying for officials, we have the Officials Association come in and do their clinic right here with our team so that we can get a scrimmage outside of the regular season. We've had a lot of parents pitch in to bring their children to competitions, to just make it there. We have people volunteering to do things that they've never done before. So it's galvanized a lot of people. I think it's made us stronger in a lot of ways, but I also think that there's a time and a place for that to end, and a time for us to really be able to sink in and do what we're supposed to do without having to reach out for everybody's help in the Hudson Valley besides just our own school community.
I would agree with everything Mr. Averill said, and what I would do is, though, go back just so I can kind of put some numbers and figures with things. I started as the superintendent in July of 2009, and I don't want to point fingers at previous administrations or Board of Education, because there's plenty of responsibility for what led us to what we were dealing with. But upon getting my position, I started to learn that we were millions and millions of dollars in the negative, and that's what was very problematic. When Mr. Averill talks about the cuts during the course of the year, that was heart-wrenching for me, because I worked in this district for 15 years, and I knew what it took for things to get built up and to watch it get teared down, and knowing that I was the leader during that time caused a great deal of conflict. But also then I would say that we had to abide by laws, and because of those cuts that happened during the mid-year, we actually we cannot spend more than the voters authorized, and we met our obligation by less than 1/10% on a $50 million budget. So we did all of this activity, and it had to happen mid-year, and it was terrible. But we would have been in deeper water had we have not taken that action. Mm-hmm. And then I wish we wouldn't have had to deal with those issues, but I would say what we went through in 2009 and 10, and then 2010-11, actually has now prepared our district as we go forward under what's now called the 2% tax cap climate, which is another law which came into place around school budgets. We were forced to take a look at how we did business 2 years before that law. Other districts weren't doing that, and so now I think that in addition to the synergy and the great community involvement that we saw take place, the way that we had to take a look at how we spend our money is definitely going to benefit the community of Saugerties for years to come.
And getting back to your dark day description, when you take away sports and extracurricular activities, you're taking away the social fabric of your school community. And that does create dark days, because then kids don't get together as often as they would or should. And I think the school itself loses some of its energy, because now it's just kids coming to school for academic reasons, which is nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't have that social fabric that schools have to have in order for everybody to come together, everybody to learn from each other, as well as learn from the teachers and staff at the school.
And truthfully, there's a lot of pieces that are still missing. When we look at our arts and music program, for example, we had a music person in the high school that was solely here for the choir and the chorus. And right now we have musical people and there, band people that are doing the choir and the chorus and do a job. But when you look at the levels of what people can do and what we've had to cut, it makes a big difference. And keep in mind that
during teachers of business, teachers of technology.
We've had SLAM, a group start up, Saugerties with library and media and music. That was a great group that started up in the wake of all of this, and they're still going strong and raising money to put in the coffers in hopes that, you know, for a rainy day that they can help out. And they're helping out each year, bring program in. This year and last year they brought programs in the elementary and the secondary school. But keep in mind too, we had a major anonymous donor 2 years ago to keep our sports program going. With one person donated $150,000 alone to keep our sports program going. So with people like that in your community, you know, you can't go wrong, and you will survive in times like this, and we have.
And
I think we're all proud that we've survived to this point, and we're actually, what I always considered in Saugerties, we do a very good job with less than many other districts have, even locally.
Just coming off of that, that was a very good day when I heard sports was back on again. I was ecstatic. We're going to change the pace a little bit here.
Sure.
Mr. Apostol, why did you become an administrator?
Well, when I was a teacher, I thought I was reaching a lot of students. But being an administrator, I thought I could reach a lot more. As a high school principal, I certainly did. Where I had a class load of maybe a couple hundred kids, now all of a sudden I'm responsible for 500 kids. And then as the years went on, I realized if being an assistant superintendent, I'd be able to touch 3,000 kids. Not as much personal touch, but the decisions I make and the things that I do during the course of the day hopefully benefit 3,000 students, close to 3,000 students, and many more, because some of the things that I do and some of the decisions I make probably affect students in other districts too.
Right.
And that's why, because I thought that given the experience that I have and some of what little talent I have, I'm able to touch students and make their lives better.
Have you always stayed in Saugerties for your career?
No, I was in Albany as a teacher, and then as a principal of a high school, I was in Greenville and Mechanicville, and then I came to Saugerties as assistant superintendent.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Averill, why did you become an administrator?
I've often asked that question myself, Ethan. I grew up an administrator, first of all. My father was an administrator, retired as a superintendent, and I guess I was intrigued by a lot of what he did. I also feel like you can touch a lot of people, but I do feel that I always felt that I was a problem solver, and I like to make decisions as a teacher, and kind of stepped outside the box a lot to make those decisions. It was a difficult decision for me, really, to move from teaching to administration, because I loved my coaching, I loved my teaching, and I guess I just got asked and snowballed, you know, one position snowballed into the next in the school district. I was in Rondout Valley, and before I knew it, I was a high school assistant principal there, and then an opening came up on the mountaintop for a principal, which is Hunter Tannersville. So I went there for 5 years, and then this junior high position opened up, and I was, you know, this is my community. It's been my community since 1991. So I decided to come off the mountain, and instead of driving up and down that mountain every day, to come off and take this position. So, you know, amazingly enough, you know, I got my degree in 1994, 95, took a paternity leave for that year and watched my two daughters when they were babies at the time, and did my coursework at night, and one thing led to another, and here I am.
Awesome. Mr. Turner, why did you become an administrator?
I think similar to Mr. Averill, I was probably a bit reluctant to go into administration. I'd actually, I first taught at a BOCES Center for Special Education for students with special needs in Plattsburgh, New York, where I had student taught, and then moved to the Hudson Valley and took a position as a teacher of alternative education at Saugerties High School. And I was certified as a school administrator for a couple of years, and was in doing curriculum work one summer for my alt ed program. And I was approached and asked if I would be a dean of students, and I thought that would be perfect because I could teach half the day, I could be involved in coaching, which I was also doing at the time, and I could you know, be a dean of students and apply some of, you know, the degree that I'd kind of worked very diligently to obtain. And then through the interview process, they instead said, would you want to be the assistant principal? And the truth is, I really didn't want to be the assistant principal, but I did some soul searching and decided I would give it a shot, took a leave of absence from my teaching position. I got into it, and I found that I had a knack for, I guess, as Mr. Averill said, being a problem solver and being able to apply those skills. And it was great to also begin working with hundreds and hundreds of students at a time. And then I was lucky enough to become the principal of Grantee Morse Elementary School, which was a job that I truthfully loved. After a few years, I started to, as someone else described, you get a little bit itchy and thinking that potentially I could be doing more, and decided to apply for the superintendent's position. And luckily the board supported that, and it hasn't always been perfect, but I think in general I truly enjoy it. And again, I think that I've got a good skill set that helps me in that role. And well, now I've been doing it for 3 years, and I think we've been successful. It depends on what measure someone wants to evaluate it by, but I think much like Mr. Apostol spoke to, now it's really great that I get to have an impact over 3,000 students on a daily basis, and you know, just working to make sure that everyone has what they need to be successful in the school system. And also never giving up what my roots were. You know, like I know Mr. Averill still coaches different sports. A lot of people know that one of my pastimes is I work with parents who are maybe having difficulties with their students with special needs, because that was my background. And I'm very much a child advocate. Kind of quietly, I do an awful lot of work for an awful lot of people to help make sure that their children are getting what they need from their school systems.
Okay.
Can you all describe some of the main objectives of your job?
I'll start, I suppose, because maybe we could just work down. I think, well, the main objective, the official title, Superintendent of Schools, is given the job description as the Chief Executive Officer for the school district. So there's a Board of Education, which of course is above me, and they're the policy-making body, and they do the hiring and firing. My job, though, is to make sure, again, that on a day-to-day basis, that all of the administrators, all of the teachers, all of the teaching assistants, all the bus drivers, everyone has what they need to be successful on a daily basis. And we do have a wonderful staff and people who are able to step it up when they need to. But I suppose my job is to do that for the 4 elementary schools and for the junior senior high school.
My main objective as a junior senior high school principal is to manage this building. We have 1,500 students, 120 teachers, many support personnel, custodians. But really, I'm here for the students to make sure that they have a chance to be successful in life. That's the way I look at the job, and all my decisions are based on that. You know, we want to make lifelong learners here. We want students to leave this school with something so that they can go out in community and be a productive member of society. So really, my focus is there, and the decisions I make are based on that, and everything else comes with that, managing the building, managing the staff.
If I could say, in a lot of ways, I'm jealous of Mr. Averill, because, and also I'll acknowledge that for the same reason I'm jealous of him is some of the same reasons why I respect that he may have a more difficult day-to-day position than I do. And that's because he does get to have the direct interaction with the students and the staff. You know, and there are about 1,500 students and probably 300 staff up at this building, and that's both the most rewarding thing and it's also the most taxing thing. I miss the rewarding piece because he gets that day-to-day interaction. So often my job is in an office in front of a computer or dealing with lawyers and attorneys, but we each have our respective roles. But it's both why I have great respect, but it's also why I'm jealous. But I also can acknowledge that it takes great endurance to be able to do what it is that he does.
And I think with Mr. Turner as well, being a superintendent of schools is a very difficult position, especially in New York State right now. So I give him a lot of credit for taking that position on.
There was a survey done a few years back, and it came out that one of the hardest jobs in the United States is the high school principal. So Mr. Averill deserves a lot of credit for what he does day in and day out with 1,500 students. Well, getting to your question, my objective is to keep programs in this district moving so that we can give our students the opportunity to succeed in life. And that's one aspect of my objective. The other aspect, and Mr. Turner said it to me many times, I attempt to keep the trains running. but sometimes I feel like I'm trying to get the trains on the track, let alone running. And I try to do that by provide servant leadership, where I try to take care of the needs of the staff, take care of the needs of the students, and take care of the needs of parents or community members who call with a complaint to make sure that we provide, and I call it customer service, so that people can perceive the school in a positive way. Nothing worse than having a person talk to another person. I called the school and nobody returned my call. And a lot of times I have to say to people, whether they're students or parents or community members, I'll find the answer for you. You may not like my answer, but I'll find the answer for you and I'll call you back. And I think that puts the school in a positive light. Because when you're honest with people like that, whether they agree with you or not, at least you made the attempt to provide service to them.
How do you address these priorities on a daily basis?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a difficult thing to do because you could be working on something that's very important, and then the phone rings, and something might come in a crisis mode, and so you have to address that. I think based on the experience that you have, you got to determine in a quick fashion what problem or what crisis takes priority. Sometimes, for instance, if there's a bus accident, absolutely that would take priority. Someone who didn't get credit for have too many have extra days off, sick days, than they probably think they have or they thought they had, that is not as high priority as some of the other stuff that comes in.
Yeah. If I reflected, I was thinking about this last night, just this year alone. On Labor Day weekend, before the school year started, we got hit with 2 hurricanes, and that washed out a number of roads. That meant someone had to figure out how to reroute the buses to ensure that all the students could get picked up and that we could open school on the days that we wanted to open schools, etc. Well, that was me, working with our business official and our transportation person, coming in on Sundays and Mondays and rerouting buses and trying to and communicating with the highway departments and figuring out what's open and what's not open. And I guess part of it is the excitement as never knowing what to expect with our jobs. You can plan and you can prepare, but then I was going to lead to what we really had to deal with during the course of this year, and that was, shortly into the beginning of the year, we had a principal whose husband passed away suddenly, and now we had a building which was in crisis because all of that. Not only was the principal dealing with issues, but her coworkers and her peers and the students all were feeling that. And then we had our high school nurse pass away, and that was, again, a traumatic event now hitting a different part of our community. And then we had a secretary in my office pass away. Then we had a teacher from the junior and senior high school pass away. And then we had the person responsible for calling our substitute service pass away. These were all things that we were expected to make sure that kids could come in every single day and get provided the education they need every day, and yet we were dealing with truly heartfelt problems that both impacted us individually because we knew these people ourselves, these were our friends as well, but we had to keep our own emotions in check and make sure that the kids coming into school could still do what they needed to do and helping out all of the staff. And these are some of those things that I don't know that they're noticed or appreciated by those in the community. But there's no way that if we all didn't work together, and by that I mean not just this group, we do have a great group of administrators, we have a great group of teachers, we have a great group of teaching assistants. Titles don't make a difference in matters like that. It's that we came together and got ourselves through, and we're sitting here now at the end of a school year in which we've dealt with all of these crises. And we're able to handle those and yet still provide a good quality education. So it's, Caitlin, I don't know if I got to everything, but those became priorities even while we had to deal with the day-to-day or the expectations on an annual basis.
Let me spin off a story about what he said about the hurricane and what I said about how you pick your priorities in certain things, but you still got to provide the service. On Labor Day Saturday, I was making phone calls to tell parents that the bus will be rerouted this way and that way. And one parent said to me, and this is not a criticism, one parent in that conversation said to me, is there still going to be football practice on Tuesday? Well, here I am trying to get buses to school, which is very important, and yet I had to provide that service for that parent. And I did find out that there would be practice so that I could go back to our tower. So you have to, in your mind, I didn't pick up the phone and call Mr. Averill or the AD and say, so we football practice Tuesday? I went through all my bus situations, I conferred with Mr. Turner the rest of the weekend, and then when I got to school on Tuesday, I was able to call the parent. So you do get those, and that, to that parent, that question was probably as important as the information she got from me about the rerouting of the bus. So you gotta provide that service to that person, and that's how you get your priorities.
How do you prioritize, Mr. Averill?
Well,
But he's a little different, he's got more crisis than we have.
first of all, you need two good secretaries sitting out front.
Yeah,
That makes
absolutely.
a big difference.
Well said.
Yeah.
But I also feel that the schedule is very important for me. So when I schedule during the week, I can prioritize my day in my schedule. And the only thing that throws that schedule off are crisis situations. And that happens a fair amount. But if I'm going to work on educational matters, evaluations, and getting into classrooms and meeting with teachers, I need to schedule those in. If I don't schedule those in, it just won't happen. So organizing is very important, but I'm in a reactionary position. So a lot of times what we do is we react to situations that happen. So when I come in the morning, I would say it's a matter of 2 minutes before the first problem hits my desk, and then I try to solve that and go on from there and look at my schedule to see when I can solve the rest of the problems that are coming at me.
And I would say in his position, he probably makes thousands of decisions before 7:30 in the morning.
sure.
And 999 are done exactly right, and then it's that one that comes back and
And you spend the rest of the day on it.
Yeah, that's right.
But we could talk about social media and everything, how it plays into our role now too, because, now, in the past, you used to get your information, your secretary would filter all your mail and give you the important mail. Today, I average about 80 to 100 emails a day that come in on top of everything else. So I still get the hard copy mail, but the email comes in. And what I find with email is a lot of people like to email, and that gets the problem off of their plate onto somebody else's plate, in particular mine a lot of days. So I have to read the email and react to that email or take some action to it. And when you do that, that takes up time as well. And a lot of times that's at night. So, I might be going to bed thinking what I'm going to be doing first thing in the morning because I just got 10 emails that haven't quite been solved. I have to take care of them in the morning.
Okay. How does the opportunity for students in the school district compare with other districts?
I'm going to start with that one.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I was just down in White Plains for the Locks games this weekend and looked at the White Plains High School. And when you start comparing yourself and what they have and the facilities they have, it can be difficult. But I think our job is to create and think outside the box and give the students as much of opportunity as we can within the system that we have. I think our students are given lots of opportunities. For example, we have a strong New Visions program this year for seniors that have more students in it that have ever been involved. We offer VOTEC. We don't shut the door on VOTEC students like some of the other schools do. We haven't. We have a large number of students that attend the vocational training program, which I think is extremely important and gives them an opportunity to do that. We have a WISE program for seniors. We've been able, through all of this, keep the majority of our advanced placement classes, which I think is extremely important for our students here. Our special ed program is very strong. We've gone through state audits. They've looked at our special ed program from the bottom right up in the last 3 years to try to help us and come up with solutions to meet the needs of all of those students as well. So through it all, even though we've been cut down, our class sizes may be a little bigger in some areas, most of our talks center around how we save programs. When I talk to Mr. Turner and Mr. Apostol, it's how do we keep the program in? It's very rarely how do we take a program out. Yeah. It's the opposite. How can we keep it in, and what can we move around to try to keep the
collectively we've
programs?
had to be pretty creative with it too.
Right.
But we're in an interesting dynamic because I'll make a comparison with our neighboring district, Onteora, in which I always feel like Saugerty's community gets the best bang for their buck out of the school system, because we are able to offer most of the same sorts of programs that other schools do, but we do it for about half the cost. Specifically, we average about between $17,000 and $18,000 cost per pupil, and right next door they average $35,000. I don't beget them for that, but really it's because the bulk of their funding comes from the reservoir, which feeds New York City. So they get an awful lot of money to do things that I wish we could do, but I don't know that their district is any better off at the end. But it depends on what you want to make that comparison on. But I would love to have the luxury to not have the fiscal matters at the forefront with all of our decision making. And I think that whether it's White Plains or Ontario or some other districts have those abilities, and we don't. So I would like to not have to be concerned so much about it all of the time.
And we are lucky that we had a big building project that happened just before the crisis hit, the financial crisis. So we have a lot of new facilities, one in which we're sitting in right now. Some of the athletic facilities that we have. We're also lucky enough to have a community here that takes a lot of pride in what they do in a community. So we have one of the premier facilities in Cantine Field for our access right across the street. So there's many schools that come up and they're jealous of the fields that we play on versus their own fields. And that's a community school relationship that has happened over the years here, traditionally. So we do okay. Certainly schools have more, some schools have less, but I would say Saugerties does do a lot with what we have, the resources that we have.
I think if you looked at similar sized districts and districts who have the same total taxable valuation of the properties, we're as good as any. Where you get a similar sized district who might have more programs is because they have more property in town that they can use for tax purposes and bring money in. A good example of that, Ethan, you probably remember last year, our baseball team lost in the state finals to Burn Hills. Burn Hills is a similar sized district to Saugerties, obviously, because we were in the same class in the section, state finals. But Burn Hills has tremendous taxable income, property to draw school taxes. I knew the AD, I know the AD very well, and I think at one point he had 80, Class A school, 80 sports teams in his district, because they had the taxable property to bring money in to support that and other programs. But if you look at similar sized districts, similar tax valuations, we're as good as any. We're as good as any.
I completely agree. Go to sections for wrestling at Monroe.
You see it, yeah.
That's always tough. But then again, I think it's like you all just said. Why compare when you're worried about us?
Yeah.
And I think you guys are doing a great job at that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where do you want this district to be in 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years?
Wow.
Whoa.
Caitlin.
Oh, Caitlin, that's a tough one.
3 years, 5 years, and 10 years.
I'm going to start, and Mr. Turner probably finished because he probably has more depth knowledge in that than I have. But I would like to see it financially stable, addition of programs that equal most districts, and one of the programs or one of the aspects would be an increase in our technology. Mr. Averill, you probably have better...
I agree on all of those points. We live in the 21st century, so catching up with technology is very important to give the students the opportunity, But I agree with everything that Mr. Apostol said there.
Yeah, if I were to try to go specifically on your 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year question, also in tune with what both gentlemen are saying, I envision a time in which potentially we're not using textbooks in the classic fashion, but really instead we move toward using some other technology, be it iPads or tablets, etc. We know that the learning opportunities for students abound with some of those technologies. I'd like to start moving toward that. I would like to see where we might have where high school offerings may be done in a very different fashion, whereby we don't limit students based only on what we can do within the walls of the school system, but tap into online courses and distance learning courses and perhaps educators from outstanding academic institutions working with our students online, perhaps learning languages that we may not have the ability to offer, or other types of courses. Then from the teaching perspective, applying good data analysis. Okay, because right now there's lots of data being thrown around and people are using it for differing purposes. I'm not talking about what ends up on the front page of the newspapers. That stuff and what's in a school report card, there's very few meaningful things which can be extracted from a school report card that's run and that the general public oftentimes holds against us as to what it means or what it doesn't mean. But what I'm talking about is if we had good data analysis going on very regularly, in which students may take a test at a given time. The teacher has that test coded to meet different curricular standards. They know within seconds as to how good or bad they did in instructing students in a particular area, and can modify their instruction almost instantaneously to ensure that all kids are then getting what they need. These things are not difficult to do in practice, but getting it embedded is what's difficult. Again, because let's make sure that all kids have some sort of a technological device, whatever that is. Again, be it a laptop, be it an iPad, or whatever else might exist. As we know, technologies are advancing far faster than the school systems do. So where will technology be in 3 years or in 5 years? How long until the television as we know it is not a piece of technology that, or at least television as I had known it. And how do we turn these into learning tools? Well, it can be done, and I think the overall student opportunities are what will grow once we can start moving in these directions.
How do you envision a school district working in a utopian society, free of fiscal problems?
Well, I would say not only free of fiscal problems, but free of influences free of other influences.
Yeah, it's great.
Because there's a number of other things that impact us. I mean, you couldn't fathom until you sat in our chairs what we get, because again, we have 3,000 different students. Mr. Averill has 1,500 different students, and each of those families have their own perspectives as to what a good quality education is. I can't even delve into it because it would. But sometimes you get a phone call and you think, I can't believe that this is what's important to this person, but it is important to them. In a utopian society, though, it would be one in which the educational experiences are generally respected by the greater community, and not one in which, I'll say it, which politicians and other individuals have vilified public educators. I wish people would see through what's going on. You follow the money. Is there someone who benefits from charter schools? Are there people who benefit from private schools? Are there people who benefit from some of these political activities that are going on? And the answer is there are. So people need to wake up and pay attention that there are big businesses making huge donations to politicians so that they can make more money based on the decisions which get made. And right now, kids are getting and kids and public school systems are getting played in the middle of this. I'll recommend that people read Diane Ravitch's book, The Rise and Fall of the Public School System. It's eye-opening. But in a utopian society, kids would show up every day, enjoy being at school every day. The parents and the community would be involved to the greatest degree possible, and we would have students walking out of here as Rhodes Scholars.
I think you said it best.
I think we are affected so much by external forces, whether that be the politicians telling us how to run the school, whether that be students coming in here with a boatload of problems, families coming to us with a boatload of problems. So without all those external forces that take up a lot of our time and energy, I think the students would be provided with the education that they could leave here and have the opportunity to succeed in the world.
How do you want to be remembered as an administrator in this district?
Very simple. He got it done.
To me, it's just about respect. You know, if I walk out here and people say they've respected the job I've done, then I think that's important. And for me to see statistics on students being successful in college and beyond, then you know personally that you've gotten the job done.
I think I told Ethan, pick up on that, I told Ethan the other day, I went to a college graduation the other day, and I had 6 of my former students graduate from that college, of 200 and some kids. I probably was number 1 in that, at that graduation as a principal of 6 kids.
And I do think sometimes you
That's
run, you
important.
see out in the community, you might run into a former student, you know, or students. I was at an event last summer, you know, from students from Hunter-Tannersville, and everyone came up to me and wanted to talk and tell me what they're doing, and I think that to me is very, validates what you do and the hard work that you put in when you see that the students are happy to see, even though you were a principal and had to hold the line a lot of times on what they did in high school. We had some great stories to tell each other, and I told them from my perspective, they told me from their perspective, some of the things they pulled over, some of the things they knew they were wrong with, so it was a lot of fun being there.
Do you remember when you,
Those are great experiences. I want to be remembered as someone who gave it their best and did the best on behalf of the students. And I think that we, all 3 of us, try to walk that walk every single day.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Turner, Mr. Averill, and Mr. Apostol
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you,
Thank
Ethan,
you.
and thank
You
you,
guys did a nice
Caitlin.
job.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you for joining us today for another JPI interview.